Today is January 28th, 2019. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Harold Tucker in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born?
Fort Scott, Kansas, January 5th, 1950.
January 5th, 1950. Who's your father?
Lloyd Tucker,
Lloyd Tucker. And your mother?
Mary Tucker. Mary
What's-
Brandstetter was her maiden name.
Brunstetter?
Brandstetter. Branstetter.
Yeah, okay. You go through school in Fort Scott?
I went to the first grade in Fort Scott, which was Winfield Scott School.
Yeah.
And then I went to second and third grade in Garland, Kansas, which is a little postage stamp size town.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there second and third grade. Then I went to just east of Fort Scott and another country school, one room, one teacher, called Lath Branch.
Lath
School.
Branch.
Lath Branch.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there's a creek out or a branch out there. There were strip pits behind it because we used to go play in the strip pits. That was our playground equipment.
Was it coal mines?
Yes, strip mines.
Yeah, strip mines.
Yeah, for coal.
Where did you graduate high school?
Yeah, Fort Scott High School in '68.
68. What kind of work your father do?
Variety. When I was young, for 16 years, he worked for the railroad, Frisco Railroad in Fort Scott, at the maintenance shops. And then the railroad wanted to move. They wanted to leave town. So they offered him a transfer to like Springfield or St. Louis, Kansas City. And he went and visited the yards and said he didn't want any part of it. So he took retirement from the railroad. And for quite a few years after that, he was either a carpenter or handyman, or he worked in the strip mines down around Garland for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to work for Peerless in Fort Scott, which builds storm doors and storm windows, and had quite a long career there before he retired.
In your schooling, who was your favorite teacher?
Oh, wow. Probably Mrs. Mason, which I probably had in about fourth and fifth grade.
Why was she your favorite?
She just seemed to really get kids and really kind of, you could just tell she was really genuine about wanting what was best for you.
Now, in your elementary, how many elementary schools did you attend?
Let's see, 1, 2, 3.
Why did you go to different schools?
Because when my dad retired from the railroad, then we moved to Garland, probably for economics, because he could get a cheap place to stay, and he could also work in the coal mines or coal strip mines there.
Okay.
And then from there, he had somewhere along the line, he was quite a wheeler dealer, a trader. He had traded for some property around Redfield, Kansas, and then he traded that property for a farm east of Fort Scott, just 3 miles out of town.
Mm-hmm.
But it was far enough that it had me so that I was zoned to go to the country school, Lath Branch.
What chore did you do on the farm?
We had goats and horses. I milked goats. I took care of the horses. I built harness for pulling horses. Cleaned the stalls and cleaned the barns and all that sort of thing. Anything applicable to that. Then I had about 100 chickens that I had of my own that I got to sell the eggs, and of course the family got to eat the eggs too. So we had eggs and goat milk. We had a good protein diet. We weren't going to starve anyway.
Did you raise any crops?
Not other than just a vegetable garden.
Vegetable garden.
We had
Okay.
a pretty good size, decent sized vegetable garden. That was about all.
You played sports in high school?
No, I didn't. I went out for wrestling, and of course, during gym class, we always played all kinds of sports, but no, what do you call it, official sports or anything. But I did go out for wrestling, and we were ready to get the year kicked off, and we had a pretty good team of wrestlers. And as it turns out, too many guys got injured, like broken collarbones and ribs. And the mothers put a stop to the program. So it was years after that before they had a wrestling program again.
What did you do for recreation in high school?
Probably by the time high school came along, I was either working, trying to make money to keep the car running, or I was working on the car. I was saving my money to buy the parts to work on the car.
What kind of car do you have?
At that time, I had a '57 Ford that I just put all blood, sweat, and tears into. And when I bought it, the engine was knocking so bad you could hear it a block away. But it still ran, so I pulled it up on the trailer and took it home, tore the engine out, got a different block, and rebuilt it. And that engine went through a half dozen different iterations before I finally sold it off and got a different car. It's like a '62 Ford with a 406. A lot of transmissions, differentials, a lot of time spent under the car, tickets. Like when I went to the Army, I was one ticket away from losing my license. So when I got out of the Army, my license was pretty clear.
What did you do after high school?
Went to work at the same factory my dad was working at Peerless. I was graduating one day, and he told me I had a job the next.
What kind of factory is it, Peerless?
Yeah, it's storm doors and storm windows.
doors.
It's still there to this day.
Okay.
Yeah, going strong.
Is that in Fort
Fort Scott.
Fort Scott,
Yeah.
okay.
So on the south end of Fort Scott.
Yeah. What did you do there?
I was a glass cutter. I was a saw man where I cut the frames for the picture windows, mostly. Didn't do much in the way of doors. But I cut a lot of glass, tons and tons. And then after the supervisor didn't really care for my light attitude, I was always clowning around doing something. When I'd cut a glass and I'd break it, I would think, well, that looks like a fish, or that looks like a fox, or whatever. And so I'd take a magic marker and draw some things on it, show it to everybody. Oh boy, he got upset. So they put me on the other side of the factory where they had scrap metal. They had an extruder over there, and when you run an extruder, you get a lot of good metal, but you make a lot of scrap in the process. And my job for a few months anyway, before I left, was to load the scrap trailer. And I did that better than anybody ever did.
How long did you work there?
Probably a year before I went to the Army, and then about a year after I got out of the Army.
Now, did you enlist or were you drafted?
It was kind of a dual thing. I was drafted. Me and my friend and I were talking about joining, and then we went home one day and there the papers were. So we went up. He stayed with the draft, the 2-year hitch, and I joined so that I could get the mechanical training that I thought would give me some credibility when I got out.
And you joined when?
Well, I joined on the early entry program, which I think I went active in October, so it had to be some sort of a 5 months early entry thing where you got to stay. So I'm not sure what the join date was, April or June or somewhere.
You know the date you went on active duty?
It was October of '69.
Do you recall what day in October?
I sure don't.
Okay.
I do have my DD-213 with me, though, if you want to see.
Sure. Yeah.
Probably. Actually, it's probably easier to see if I use my phone. Hold on a second. How they date all that.
Ayers, April 29th, October 5th, 1969. And looked like he had the early entry April 23rd.
There we go.
Yeah.
Seemed like April was in there somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, like you went overseas January 5th, 1960? 1950, 1950. No, that's.
No, that's birthday.
You went over July 10th, 1970. Does that sound
It
right?
would, yeah, I went through AIT in late '69, then it was Christmas
Yeah.
break. Then I went to, I went to basic late '69, then Christmas break, then we went to AIT
Yeah.
for 15 weeks of wheel
Where'd you
and
go
track.
for basic training?
Fort Jackson, South
Fort Jackson.
Carolina. It's a beautiful place, if
Yeah.
you're not in basic training. That is.
Tell me about basic.
For me, anyway, I'm sure it's different things for different people, but for me, it was more about discipline and learning to do what you're told without asking. Because I tend to be why do you want me to do this, or why do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
And they really don't want to bother with telling you.
Yeah.
They want to just tell you to do it.
What type of training did you have in basic?
We had, of course, a lot of fitness, climbing the bars and obstacle courses, marching. We had some fantastic drill sergeants that could march unbelievable force marches. We did a lot of the self-defense kind of, well, not just self-defense, but also the attack using the bayonet. Seemed like we were going to drill with the bayonet and how to take down an enemy soldier from behind forever. We really knew how to do that when we got out of basic. Hand-to-hand combat with the rifle was very well taught, and I think we all left there pretty well knowing what we were doing.
What's your most vivid memory of basic?
Probably other than the people, I mean, there were some really cool people there, but probably the fact that I had to dig a 6x6 hole underneath the barracks.
Why?
Well, I got crossways with a sergeant major. See, on the early entry program, you go in as an E2, so you get E2 pay. So I was in line to get linen or something, and this PFC, which was a holdover from the training, hadn't been assigned yet, was getting real lippy with the recruits, thinking we're talking to us like we were dogs, and I spoke up, and so they took me over to the first sergeant's office to have a visit with me about that, and tell me how that just wasn't the way to do things, and why I was a nervous wreck while he was just chewing me out. Unconsciously, I was standing there tapping on his desk like this. And he just exploded. He said, "It took me 19 years to get this desk, and you're pounding on it." Of course, being the smart aleck, I said, "I'm sorry it took you so long." So they had me go wait outside, and my drill sergeant came out and said, "Tucker, we got a project for you, and you're lucky this is all it is." So I think my sergeant probably went to bat for me, because normally I would do everything just right, but they kind of crossed me when they were getting rude with people, and I didn't like it.
You had to dig a 6x6?
So yeah, it was supposed to be a 6x6x6 under the barracks. Of course, you can't look under the barracks and see exactly how big the hole
Is it
is.
6 feet
So
by 6 feet?
I made sure that it was 6 feet this way where he would look in. Then I was standing on my knees, and I piled all the dirt between the ground and the rafters instead of throwing it very far, because I knew I was going to have to put it back in there anyway. And so finally, after I'd been down there a while, and a couple of guys slipped me a sandwich while I was down there, The sergeant looked down there and said, looks like enough dirt to me, Tucker. Fill it up. Get some sleep.
You pull KP?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I almost always ended up peeling potatoes or something, or cleaning the grease pit.
Yeah.
I was, somehow or another, I always landed with those, washing the pots and pans, peeling the potatoes, cleaning the grease pits. I never got, and some of it might have been by my design. I didn't really want to wait tables and be out there and have people ordering me around while I was getting them more salt and pepper or something.
Basic lasted how long?
But, it was 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
Yeah.
What'd you go from basic?
And, well, we had a break. We had a short break. It was because it was right about Christmas, New Year's holiday. So they sent us home for a couple of weeks, and then we came back after the first of the year and started our AIT in Aberdeen, Maryland. So I had a little break there. And then after AIT, we got orders to ship to Vietnam.
What'd you do in AIT?
So, wheel and track mechanic, 15 weeks.
I'm sorry?
A wheel and track mechanic.
Wheel and track mechanic.
Yeah, you covered all of it, engines, fuel systems, electrical, and track vehicles and trucks and Jeeps, all of it.
Okay.
Covered the whole gamut. And I did really well there. I excelled, and I got PFC out of AIT, which I would have had spec 4, but again, I got crossways with authority. I paid a guy to do KP for me. He didn't show up. Well, as I was leaving, we had bags packed, and we were going for the weekend to Princeton University to visit. And the sergeant, or buck sergeant that was in charge, told me that the other guy didn't show up. I said, that's on him. No, and it was on me. So they withheld spec 4 from me until I got to Vietnam, and I'd no sooner hit the ground in Vietnam. I'd just been there a few weeks, and my sergeant got me spec 4.
Now, wheel and track mechanic, is that like a deuce and a half, 3/4?
Right, all the way from Jeep to 5/4, deuce and a half, 5 tons wreckers, and all of the track vehicles.
Or like tanks and all that?
Yeah, the 548, 113 personnel carriers, the 578 recovery vehicles, M88 recovery vehicles, M48 was the tank we used most there. And we would prepare them if we get a new one shipped in. We'd have to go through it and clean up all the rust inhibitor and packaging, tape, and all that, and then refill them, drain out the preservative oil, refill them with engine oil, make sure the transmission was full.
And what's your most vivid memory of AIT?
Of course, we had to fix everything that broke too.
Yeah.
AIT. Well, other than the KP duty thing, that was in AIT. One day we were working on engines in the shop, and they were showing us and telling us how critical setting the mags were. It had 2 banks of cylinders and 2 mags to run them. And the cylinders, or the mags, if they weren't set right, the engine could run away. And so this engine was running away, and you had these paddles to put over the air horn to shut off the air of the engine in case you had a runaway. Well, paddle wasn't available on that side of the engine. So I threw a TM manual, shop manual, over it. Well, it wasn't rigid enough. It sucked a whole bunch of the pages from the manual through the engine and blew the papers all over the place. It was just literally raining little pieces of paper all over. It did slow it down a lot.
What did the instructor say?
Oh, there were probably some choice words. And really, I didn't get in much trouble over it, though, because I was trying my best. It wasn't my fault there wasn't a paddle there for that engine. I just responded and did the best I could do at the moment.
So, who were your instructors in AIT?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember their names. They were excellent, excellent teachers. I do remember that. And each different section would have a different teacher. Some of them would teach multiple sections, but there were quite a number of them. And of course, 15 weeks is a lot of training, and it's 8 hours a day. But you know, you'd have a guy that knew fuel systems inside out, upside down, you know, and he would teach you fuel systems. And the other one might teach rebuilding cylinder heads and you know, overhauling engines and clearances and torque and all that kind of stuff. It really helped me a lot. I already knew quite a little bit from working on my cars, but it really helped me get a more rounded understanding of mechanics and engines and vehicles in general.
Why isn't the track vehicle, the maintenance at Fort Knox at the Armor School?
I don't know the answer to that. That's the Army way, I guess.
Because I went to helicopter school at Fort Eustis, Virginia. That's a transportation school, and they had people working on trucks, everything there at Fort Eustis.
Just about every post, you know, every fort is going to have their own
Oh, yeah.
maintenance facilities and set up. Now a lot of them don't go into like engine overhaul. They might send that on to someone else, or they might just bring in an engine and plug it in. We did a lot of that in Vietnam for the sake of time. You know, for the most part, we just ended up changing engines and changing transmissions. In some cases, the crew would pull the engine. By the time they got an engine, they forgot where all the lines and linkage went, so I had to fly out there one time and show them where all the hoses and linkages went, and tagged them with tape and stuff. You know, I said, "Get me out of here."
Now, which did you prefer, the wheel vehicles or the track vehicles? Is that a fair question?
Boy, it's a tough question. I worked on track vehicles a lot more than I did the wheel vehicles, but I think I would pretty much always lean toward the wheel vehicles as far as just personal preference, you know, what I would rather work on.
So from Aberdeen, where'd you go?
And, from Aberdeen, I went to An Khê, went to Vietnam, where I went through in processing.
How'd you travel to Vietnam?
We went to San Francisco with incredible amounts of people there being processed and transported out. Then we flew, I want to say we stopped in Seattle, but we might not have. But from San Francisco, we ended up in Anchorage. And there we had to have some work done on the airplane, so we got to get out and mill around the airport for, I think it was about 3 hours. We were laid over there. And so then we went from there to Japan, and we couldn't leave the immediate gate area in Japan. And it seemed like we were there a couple hours, and then we got on a plane that went to Vietnam, directly to Vietnam from there. As we were coming in, you could see the fireworks. Like, oh, darn.
Now, when you were in basic and AIT, was it geared toward Vietnam?
I'd have to say so, yeah, because they taught us all about bungee sticks and booby traps and things that we might run into in Vietnam. They had some scenarios with helicopters in the trees and, you know, trying to rescue, do those kinds of activities, which would be pretty specific to Vietnam.
When you were on the airplane in San Francisco getting ready to head out, what were you thinking?
You know, I was just a wide-eyed kid. I really didn't have a clue what to expect or what to look for. You know, when I got there, they were under red alert at the base. When we got there, we had to run off the airplane and go run into this kind of a protected area behind some bunker walls, which were just stuffed with sandbags. And I had to crouch down there until they gave the all clear. And then we got on a bus, which seemed like some third world thing. had wire on the windows and, and, that was really kind of an unusual experience. And then we got to the processing center, and the barracks and the company area wasn't much different than what basic training or AIT was like.
Now, where did you land in Vietnam?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you that, but I don't have a clue. I don't know if we flew into Saigon
Now,
or
most people-
Tan Son Nhut or, I
Was
have
it
no
Cam Ranh
idea.
Bay?
Very well could have been.
Cam Ranh Bay was the
I
main.
just know that we got on a bus and went to some processing center. They processed it, and once we were processed, then we got, herded in groups, to our base camps.
Okay.
And so I wish I remembered that stuff, but I don't. It was all a blur to me at the time.
And you were assigned to what unit?
I want to say it was, I want to say 723rd Maintenance there, and it was the 4th Infantry. But I'm not really positive about that.
Okay.
Oh, well, I don't know if that'll tell her or not. 704th.
704th.
Yeah.
704th, Maintenance Battalion, 4th Infantry.
Yeah. And we always had an ordnance
Yeah.
symbol. And a lot of our support was for artillery.
Yeah.
We'd have to, if there was a campaign through the jungle, we'd have to go along.
Now, when you landed this red alert, was that at An Khê or was that at the?
No, that was at our, like Saigon or Tan Son Nhut or
Yeah.
Quinh Nhan Bay, wherever we landed.
reception
The
center.
initial, our
Yeah,
initial
yeah.
landing,
Okay.
reception, processing.
And
It
you-
seemed like we did a little bit of training there before they moved us on to our,
Did you give
to-
you
to the
any
camp.
orientation there about Vietnam?
yeah, that's could be where I got that little book, that's, how to get along in Vietnam thing. What not to do and what to do.
So what'd you do in An Khê?
I was assigned to a track shop. Sergeant Spike was my sergeant there, and basically we just waited for broken stuff to come in, and we'd fix it as fast as we could and get it back on the road again.
Was the big calf patch still up on the mountain? Hong Kong Mountain was there.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know I saw some of those insignias on different mountains, different places, but I
Because
can't
when I went
remember.
into An
if
Khê, there's a great big calf patch on.
Yeah,
on
it
Hong Kong
probably
Mountain.
was there. I just don't remember.
Yeah, okay.
I know the spider holes were up there, and the Vietnamese came out and raised heck with our camp.
Yeah.
The day before, or no, it's like 2 or 3 days before I arrived at my company location there in An Khê, some VC had come in and blown up the barracks and blew the sheet metal off of them and blew some craters in the floors of the barracks and shot a few people. And while I was there, after, I don't know, a couple of months or 3, the engineering group, which was across a field from us, but also at the base of the mountain, was attacked, and they got it a lot worse. They had a heck of a firefight there, and several people got injured out of that deal, injured or killed. And we had to take up defensive positions around our company area just in case they came after us too, but they didn't. They focused on the engineering group that night. It was their turn in the barrel.
Describe your quarters at An Khê.
Just louvered, just a conventional long barracks with louvers on the side and sandbags stacked up all the way, probably, I want to say 4 or 4.5 feet high all the way around the barracks, which stops from shrapnel. Wouldn't protect you from much of an explosion, but would help.
So what did you do in the 704th?
Just mostly maintenance work, and one time we went on a campaign in the field, and I wish I could remember the name of the campaign, but I can't. That's what I got my campaign medal for, probably. And we spent maybe 5 nights or so out in the jungle, sleeping in the mud, digging foxholes that filled up with water. Had air mattresses that didn't hold air more than 20 minutes.
Now, your 214 said you left for Vietnam July 10th, 1970. Did that be about right?
When I went to Vietnam,
Yeah.
probably close. I thought it was a little earlier than that,
Okay.
but it was somewhere close to that.
Now-
I was there just short of a full year because I didn't take R&R. I opted to just get out that 2 weeks earlier instead of going and playing.
Why'd you go out on this maneuver?
That was me and a couple of our other guys, maintenance guys, went to support the artillery group because it was pretty much an artillery armored campaign through
Was
the
this
jungle.
around on K?
And yeah, not too far from Monkey. Some of the guys called it VC Valley or something, but there's more of those around there than you can
Yeah.
shake a stick at. So I don't really know what the location was. I do know that they flew us out. When we went out to support them, it had been overcast, and so as we came in, we were catching fire, and the helicopter we were in got hit in the fuel cell, and it was leaking fuel. So he landed, let us out. Our warrant officer looked underneath it and gave him the go-ahead, and he flew that helicopter back to base camp. And the story that was told to us was as he was flipping the switches, shutting his helicopter down, and ran out of fuel. So that was a close call. Brave pilot. Guess he didn't want to get stuck there.
Now, what'd you do in support of the artillery out there?
Mainly just, in fact, I'm not sure that we really had any engine failures or transmission failures, just minor miscellaneous repairs. Help them, if they needed a track repaired. But mostly we just sat around and waited for something to break. And the one thing that did break that I was supposed to work on was a drivetrain, and it gnarled it up so bad that you'd have had to have a grinder and machine chop to get it patched up. So we didn't have the parts to change out the whole shaft, so they just hooked it up and towed it behind a tank, to get it back in to where we could work on it.
And what kind of position did you set up out there for the 5 nights you were out there?
The first, I want to say we were there for the first 4 nights. We were right on the edge of the perimeter, and their camp was already established, and they had like 50 calibers in trucks backed up to the perimeter, and then there were some howitzers strategically located for the area that they wanted to fire. And my foxhole was right next to this 50 caliber truck, and he fired that 50 caliber virtually all night long. They'd take turns, changing out up there, and they'd change out the barrels, and they'd boom, 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 all night. And it was one of those mixed blessing things. I figure, well, they're probably not going to sneak up on me in the foxhole. At the same time, I'm not going to be very rested in the morning between doing the backstroke with water in the foxhole. It was raining cats and dogs. It was miserable.
Was that during the monsoons?
Must have been, because it was rainy and muddy, just pretty sloppy. And so we were kind of, and it was so overcast that we couldn't get some supplies in. So, and it wasn't because we were so short on supplies, but we found some ear corn and stuff that the Vietnamese had probably been growing out there, and we were chewing on that. We got a couple of pictures of us sitting around gnawing on corn, like we're starving or something. But we tried to have as good a time as we could out there, just killing time waiting for something to happen. But fortunately, the only hostilities that we experienced were when we were in transit from that location to the next one. We had left some I don't know, LRPs or some people behind to guard that position, I guess, because the VC would come in and try to salvage anything that you leave behind. And So they set up claymores and had it all booby-trapped stuff before we left. Then we moved out, but we were going through really rugged terrain and ditches and creeks and stuff. And all of a sudden, they started hollering that they needed assistance. They needed some support. So they started calling in cordons for fire, and they took the M88 and lowered the spade, and they cleared out an area, and that became our campsite for that night. Because a recovery vehicle.
Okay.
It's a very large track
Yeah.
recovery vehicle, and they have a spade that they can put in the ground for support so they can lift heavier loads. Well, that spade also works to clear brush and small trees. And boy, when that M88 gets out there and starts doing circles, I mean, it clears a spot. So they pulled the howitzers up there and lowered their spades and got in position and started returning fire. And those guys were catching a lot of heat. And then after we got them supported, that settled down. Then during the night, we had some friendly fire because we didn't end up camping where we were supposed to camp, a little farther on, because those guys needed fire support. So our guys didn't know exactly where we were, and they dropped a few rounds right outside our perimeter. And that's how close it was, is my tent half in the morning. I could see daylight through my tent half where the sand particles, dirt particles had blown through my tent half. I'm like, holy mackerel, that's a little too close. So, but we were just there that one night, and then we saddled up the next day, and it wasn't too awful far before we came. It's funny how that works. You're in what seems like the deepest jungle, and you pop out, and there's the road. And then we went back to base camp. We had one incident of that I'm aware of anyway, of sniper fire during that trek through the jungle. Other than hostilities that the guys ran into, but we didn't have much to be concerned about, other than a little friendly fire.
Now, your base camp is on K?
Let's see it, yes,
Okay.
yeah, it was on K base camp at that
Okay.
time. And then I stayed in on K until they out-processed the fourth, the colors, anyway, sent the colors home. And they just redistributed most of the people that had any time left. And I went to Chulai from there.
What unit were you assigned to? in
Initially,
Chile?
I went to this area we called Sherang Valley, and I can't remember the name of that camp there. It was a real nice camp where airborne came in country and practiced. And,
What was the name of the valley?
Sherang Valley is what we called it. I don't know. I don't know the official. It's like Fort Addison or Anderson or something like that. I know they had a real nice enlisted man's club, and the camp mostly kind of set up on a hill. And we out-processed all the vehicles that the 4th brought to there. We had to do all the washing, cleaning up. We had to repair the brakes, but it's coming down the pass. Some guys probably pushed the brakes a little too hard or didn't use the gears to reduce their speed, and burned up the brakes. And
That
so
Ante Pass?
yeah, we had to do some repairs, once they got down to the valley. And then they had to pressure wash. They had a huge operation there, pressure washing all the vehicles, cleaning them up so they could be stored. And I think they were stored at Quignon. There's some storage area there where they put all the equipment. And that me knowing that equipment was there came into play later, because once I was in July, we had a 578 recovery vehicle, which is a smaller track record, and we needed a hydraulic valve for it. And so we went down to Quignon to get the hydraulic valve out of the one that was in the storage down there.
What unit were you assigned to for Chulai?
23rd Infantry. I can't
23rd.
remember the company name, or the company name.
That's the 23rd
It was a
Division?
maintenance,
Was it the
23rd Infantry Division, I
Okay.
think's what they call it.
Okay. Okay.
But I don't remember the actual company.
How did Chulai compare to Ankei?
It was pretty nice. I think we had a nice shop there, nice store we could go to. It was pretty well laid out. And we didn't really get around in it a lot because we had to work 6.5 days a week. We didn't have a lot of R&R time there. So, but we were right on the beach. From our barracks, you could take about 50 steps behind our barracks and you could look off the cliff and there's the beach. And so we just go down these stairs that somebody was nice enough to build a long time ago, and we spent a lot of time playing on the beach.
Now, did you do the same thing at Chulai you did at Ankei?
Yeah, as far as maintenance and mechanic work, yeah, it's basically the same. We had, seemed like we had a little bit more work most of the time at Chulai. Like we supported the effort, big campaign that they pushed they had in Quezon, and one of our sergeants went up there. I had to take his place as, kind of supervise the track crew, which was not very many people. It's not like it was a big deal. But we just tried to fix the stuff that they sent back from there. And they just kept resupplying and trying to feed the troops there, keep their equipment running.
Which vehicle did you work on most over there?
It'd be a toss-up between the 113 personnel carrier, because they were terrible about transmissions or steering mechanisms and their engines. The V6 Detroits would fail. Most of the time we just change them out. Once in a while we get curious and tear it down to see why it failed, but usually it's just that they need it back right away, so you put another engine in it and you go on. That one and the M48 tank, we worked on a fair amount, and when I say worked on, most of the time there, it was just a matter of changing the engine, changing the transmission, getting it back up. We'd have to ground hop start them on the ground. We call it ground hopping. But we put the engine and transmission together, take a can of diesel fuel, put the inlet line in the can, and we'd ground hop it and start it up to make sure it ran fine before we went to the trouble of putting it back in the vehicle. But those things are designed pretty well so that the whole power pack comes out and goes back in a very short period of time. It's kind of like racing in NASCAR or something. You gotta make sure you can get it in and out fast.
Now, whenever you place an engine, what do you get the replacement engine?
That would come through requisitions, and they just delivered them to us at the shop. We didn't have to go get them. They'd just bring them in there. So
How long would it take?
whoever was in charge of requisitions.
How long would it take to get a replacement engine?
Sometimes it would take a few days. Most of the time, the equipment, that we were working on, they had engines stockpiled, ready to go.
Where was your depot of maintenance?
I think that was some of it was in that Shrine Valley area. I know they rebuilt brakes and brake shoes, and they did some rebuild stuff there. I went into one of their shops and nosed around one day.
Have any contact with the local people?
Not other than hooch maids, just the girls that came in.
What was their attitude to hooch maids?
For the most part, real positive, but you never know if they were putting it on, or because if they were too negative, they probably just wouldn't keep them there, keep them working. We had one lady in Ankei that was just a grandma, and she was just really feisty, and everybody just loved her because she was so darn on her. Just never knew what was going to come out of her mouth.
Now, in those areas, did you have more VC or NVA?
Well, my experience was with the VC. I never had any encounters with NVA that I know of. But VC, when we were ambushed by VC.
What happened at the ambush?
We were sent on the road from Chulai to Quinyon to get a hydraulic valve, and then we had some parts to take to and bring back from Shirang Valley. I think some of that was like cooking heaters, like the chef would use out in the fields, and they were in the back of the truck. And when we were on our way back, going down had no incident whatsoever. It's supposed to be a secured area, but coming back, before we left the base, the girls were real fidgety, and one of them was crying, and I was telling them, "Hey, don't worry, we'll be back." And they said, "No, you won't." Well, I'm young and naive. I never paid any attention to that stuff. Like, sure, we'll be back, don't worry. So off we went, and we were probably midway back out in the middle of no man's land when we just drove right into an ambush, and they were laying in wait. Single truck, 2 M16s and a 45 is all we had. We didn't have any frags or anything, just total unprepared. We had quite a few rounds of ammo if we'd got to use it, but we were overwhelmed. They shot the front of the truck and the front tires, and probably the first rounds fired were through the windshield at the driver's chest. And the first round, the guy was such a good shot, he hit the steering column, and it ricocheted and hit me right here in the chin and knocked this tooth out. And the round and the tooth just stopped in my mouth. I spit them out on the floor. And of course, instantly getting hit, I threw my hand up, and then the windshield just exploded with bullets. And I slid down and tried to turn, and then another one came through the base of the windshield and hit me in the chest. And I'm like getting hit with a post endways. I mean, really a lot of force. And I didn't know how bad I was injured. I just knew that my brain was still working. But unfortunately, the next round that the guy fired at the driver hit Huey in the chest and sternum. And it slowed the round down enough that it didn't kill him right away. And in fact, gave him just enough time that the front tires were flat, and so Huey went off the road into this deep ditch and up on a berm, and then the truck came to rest, pointing nose down, and the ditch is full of water, and so the front third of the quarter of the truck was underwater, and there was me and Huey, the driver, and Sergeant Nixon, and Sarge was riding shotgun, so he got out first. I gave him my rifle because my rifle was there. Sarge had a 45 on him, which I don't think ever cleared the holster, but the driver's rifle was hanging on the wing nut like we always did by the windshield up there. So I helped Huey out, got him positioned on the side of the truck. Meanwhile, bullets are just literally raining down. I mean, they're unloading on us something terrible. And so then after I got Huey out, then I went back in the truck under fire and got the rifle off the wing nut. I was underneath the steering wheel trying to lift the darn rifle, get it unhooked off of the wing nut. It had sucked the strap down between the wing nut. So I was jerking it around, getting it off. So I got it out there, and I made sure it was locked and loaded. I went to the tail end of the truck, and all of a sudden the Sarge is yelling at me, "Throw me your rifle, throw me your rifle." So I turned around, and he's down there, "Throw me your rifle." So I ran down there in the water, waist deep, or hip deep, and gave him my rifle. Said, "Where's your rifle?" I dropped it in the water. It's not there. So now we got one rifle, and he's 45, and I'm trying to help Huey's holding my hand. I'm right here by the sergeant at the very front of the truck. And quite a few things happened. It was a pretty complicated event, but one time a VC came up in the middle of the road and I saw him. Huey might have nodded toward him. I turned around and saw him and yelled at Sarge, but by the time Sarge turned around to shoot that way, that guy had already fired off a burst and disappeared. He's a ghost. I don't know where he went. If he went back over the berm, I know he couldn't have come through the ditch. We'd have had to see him.
Yeah.
So he must have just ducked down on the other side of the berm or the highway. So anyway, to shorten it up a bit, the sergeant raised up and saw somebody. He kind of grunted and squatted down, and he raised back up and opened fire, but they were waiting for him to stand back up, and they killed him right there. So I was literally standing right here, the sergeant's right here, and he fell backwards into the water, and there goes the other rifle. And the 45's still on his chest, floating out there with him. And the water is just alive with bullets. So I didn't have much, Huey had since passed away and was floating face down. The sergeant's dead in the water, and I'm like a scared rat, just running up and down the truck. And I'm thinking, I'm a mechanic. I know this truck, so I can hide someplace. I can't defend myself. So I went under the truck the first time, right behind the passenger door, that frame rail. I came up and it was broad daylight on the other side. They could see me obviously there. So I came back out and I dashed down toward the fender again, like I got to get in the engine compartment or something, because they're just going to come over here and shoot me any second. So I saw the fender, and where the hood and the fender come together, the water wasn't quite up to that level. It wasn't up to that meeting point. I thought the fender on the inside goes straight down, so there's a 90-degree bend right there. There's an air pocket. So I climbed under between the tire and the fender and bent myself over backwards and shoved my face up into the air gap. And I put my knees against the bumper, which was a mistake, actually. And I braced myself and I pushed myself up in there. So I'm laying there, my arm is tucked behind me and the water level's somewhere in this area. And I got my legs braced and I'm underneath. This hand's in a cast. I didn't tell you that. I got the hand crushed earlier in a mechanic, accident. So I can hear the guys out there chattering, and they come up there and they throw some charges under the truck and they blow it up a little more, and they're shooting up, and they shot right down the side of the truck, and I heard the chamber lock open on their gun, their rifle, clack. Maybe they're out. So they kept rummaging around, and finally one of them stepped on my darn toe. I braced my knee against the bumper, and I left my toe out too far, and he stepped on it. He felt around. He grabbed my leg, and he starts pulling, and boy, they start talking 100 miles an hour. And then they grab my arm, and they pull me. But they're pulling me against the fender this way. So they're not going to get me out that way. And they're pulling me, and they pull my leg. And one of them squats down, and he's reaching around underneath there, feeling. He gets hold of my cast, and pulls on my cast a few times. Squeezed my private area, trying to see if I would jerk or anything. And then he felt around some more, and he came back up, got his breath, and they were chattering. They pull him on, then they left it. And then they were rummaging around the truck. I could hear them inside the truck, moving stuff around, climbing on it. And then pretty soon one would just grab me just out of I could kind of feel the water moving if they were getting closer. So I was kind of anticipating it. And I couldn't put my arm back behind me. I had to kind of leave it float, pretending to be dead, and so I'm like, I hope this is right. I have no idea how a dead guy floats here, but I'll try this. And so then they grabbed my arm again. About 3 different times they grabbed my arm and grabbed my leg, and they were determined to pull me out. They never shot me again. I was already shot twice, but they didn't shoot me again, and they left me for dead. eventually. And I laid there probably 10 minutes or so after all the chatter had stopped and there was no water motion. And I pushed myself out and looked around real quick. By this time, this lip was swelled clear up here. It was closing this side of my nose off. Had to look like heck. A bus completely packed with civilians stopped, and the driver asked if I wanted to ride. I said, no, send help. And he went down the road about 2 miles, and there was an MP station. And the MPs come roaring back up there, and they had the twin coax or whatever on their turret. They opened fire and were shooting the whole area behind where the truck was disabled there. And boy, my adrenaline let go. Right up until that point, I was just pretty cool, pretty calm, kind of under control. Thought, I got this. I just got to wait it out. Somebody's going to come. And when I heard them come and I saw that vehicle, I lost it. I mean, my adrenaline hit, and he tried to lay me down up there on the pavement to give me first aid, and my legs were jumping up and down. I just could not hold still. I said, can I bend my knees? Sure, go ahead. So I bent my legs, and I could hold them still better. But he looked me over and said, oh my God, are you one lucky son of a gun? He said, a fraction one way or the other, and you'd be dead. Because they shot me right there in the clavicle joint. And went down in my shoulder this way. So they medevaced me out and back to Chulai Hospital. First I went to a field hospital. That guy just could not quit looking at my eye. He was just sure that there must be glass in my eye, and especially my right one, because my left one covered this, and all that glass fragment hit my right side, and it just looked like raw meat. And he couldn't get over the fact that there was no glass in my eye. So he finally said, we're going to have to send you to base camp. You got to have surgery. So they sent me to base camp, and the doctors fixed me up really good. That gentleman, Peter Bate, that I showed you, he came running down to base camp to see me before they took me into surgery. The doctor was nice enough to ask if there's anyone I'd like to see before I went into surgery. I wasn't wise enough to know that this is a real critical surgery and I might not live through it. I'm happy as a lark that I got doctors and nurses. Yeah. Of course, it probably the drugs too. But so they went in and just did one heck of a good job fixing me up. And here I am today. The major that was my doctor offered to give me a medical out, to probably rehab in Japan or back to the U.S. He said, you've done your thing. You can go home. But then a full bird and sergeant major, I think, came to visit me, and they said, well, you got 4 more months, and you got over a year left. You may end up coming back. So I said, okay, I'll stay. He said, you never have to leave base camp, and all you have to do is supervise. Just come back, and we'll use you in the track shop for that. Well, best laid plans of man. They failed to tell somebody else, I think, because I still ended up working, and I had to go out that's where I had to go out and show those guys how to put the transmission back on the engine. And as I was flying out there, I'm thinking, okay, don't have to leave base camp again.
Now, what'd you do out there when you had to go out and show these guys?
I just had to show them where the hoses and linkages all went to put the engine and transmission back together. They'd taken it apart in haste, and it took them longer to get the engine and transmission. I can't remember which one they were changing, but they'd forgotten. And it might have been a completely different crew. How they swapped out crews sometimes. Some would go on R&R. Well, these guys were charged with getting this thing up and running, and they couldn't remember or didn't know where everything went. So I went out there and I flagged it all for them real quick, and said, okay, where's my ride back? And there wasn't another flight going until the next day. I said, I'm not staying out here. I had enough, of this stuff. So there was a major working on a 175 Howitzer, changing out the barrel, and he was supervising it. He had his little loach and warrant officer there. I went over and asked him when he was going to be done. Could I get a ride back to base camp with him? He said, this is going to be several more hours. Why don't you just go tell the warrant officer over there, I said, that take you back to base camp. And so, of course, the warrant officer wasn't going to take my word for it. He had to go talk to the major. So he came back and said, come on, let's go. So he flew me back. And of course, he couldn't help but give me a few thrills on the way back. Is that VC? Like, you crazy, dude. He's just clowning around, probably seeing if he could get a yell out of me. So,
Did he?
yeah, I'm sure he did. I'm sure. Yeah, I had the headset on and everything. I'm yelling at him. What the heck are you doing? I've already been shot twice. I don't want to do it again. Not like I considered myself Superman or anything.
You in Vietnam how long?
Just short of a year, the 2 weeks.
Besides being shot, what's your most vivid memory of Vietnam?
Just the absolute stunning beauty of the country. Just, I was on helicopters quite a few times, going to and from, and every time. And sometimes we would have to go out to the fire bases. We'd load up our deuce and a half and put an engine in the back, and we'd go to the fire base and just going through the mountains and just stunning scenery. And of course, I was raised in southeast Kansas. We had some trees and some strip mines. We didn't have scenery like that. Gosh, it was pretty, real pretty.
Did you think South Vietnam was going to fall?
Not really. I really didn't. I just thought one of these days we're going to quit piddling around and we're going to go cut off the head of the snake. Mm-hmm. And we just couldn't bring ourselves to do that. You can't fight a war by saying we're gonna drive a stake in the ground here. Come fight us. Come see us. And they're just going to keep picking at you and picking at you. You gotta take the fight to them.
Why were we in Vietnam?
We were trying, my take anyway, is that we were trying to prevent or contain communism and the domino theory. If one place falls, the next one falls, and the next one falls. And so we were trying to prevent that from happening. And I guess at some point when the American people weren't willing to pay the price, then we just had to pull the plug. If you lose support from your people, from your country, then you're not going to be able to hold your ground.
Tell me about coming home.
Coming home was a little tough. It was, the first thing I noticed, though, when we got on the airplane, there was a magazine in the back of the seat, and I opened the page, and it crinkled and went because it was dry. all that humidity for a year, your sheets were like they were damp when you were trying to brush your sheet or straighten your bed up. Everything was damp because of the humidity, incredible, intense humidity. And that magazine crinkled, and I thought, oh my God, you hear that? You hear that? But coming home was, we did out processing in Seattle, I think, and the reception was not warm and fuzzy. In fact, it was like people were mad to see you, not hostile toward me, but they'd say little things, like, "Oh, you're one of those baby killers," and it wasn't true, and it certainly wasn't something that they should be saying to a guy that's just returned, putting his life on the line for his country, or felt like for his country, and for the freedom and democracy that we believe in.
Where'd you land?
I think it was Seattle. That's where they brought us back to. And I do remember that it was a nonstop flight. We got on, it was, now I don't know about the time difference and all that, it was something like 8 hours flight time or something. It just seemed like it was a really short flight coming back because there was no connecting flight. We just got on the plane and flew back. And when we got off the plane, we're all standing in this big open area, and they had us line up, read off names. You line up here, you line up here. All of you guys, you're going to Fort Riley. Of course, I'm from Kansas. I'm like, all right, this is going to be awesome. And you guys over here, you're going to Germany. I tell you, I was so upset. And I came back home, and I just kept dwelling on that, and I finally said, I'm going to call my congressman or something. There's something I got to be able to do something. So I got a hold of his office, and they told me as soon as I get there, fill out this form. Well, that's what they told everybody. And I went there, and I filled out the form, and you never heard anything else about it again. Hell, as slow as the Army moves, they couldn't even get it processed in the year I had left. So I found out after I got there that General Westmoreland had come and inspected the vehicles that were supposed to be at ready for reforger or in case of an attack or hostilities. All the guys from Fort Riley are supposed to run over there and jump in their vehicles and go to war. And they didn't have doors, transmissions, wheels. So Westmoreland gave them a real rigid timeline, like 6 months. Everything will be ship-shape and ready to roll. And by God, it was. And they pulled out all the stops. They brought all the mechanics that were coming out of Vietnam. They brought them over there. And since I had so much time left, they used me there for that. And we worked.
Germany?
Yeah, in Germany. Karlsruhe, Germany, just outside, little Kasern, just outside of Karlsruhe.
What'd you do in Germany?
Mechanical maintenance on mostly wheel vehicles there. We did some armored personnel carriers, but mostly the fleet that had to get up and running were deuce and a halves. We did a tremendous amount of them, a few 5 tons, but mostly deuce and a halves.
What unit was over there?
547th, I want to say.
547.
That's who I out-processed from, so it should be on my...
547th maintenance?
Yes, or ordnance. I can't remember how they state it. It's where I out-processed. So it should be... There's Fort Dix, and I came from... Seems like they do everything backwards here. 547th Ordnance Company, USAR Europe, or Europe is what that, USAR Europe. 547th Ordnance. So I don't know who they're.
547th Ordnance Company.
I don't know who they're attached to or
Yeah.
anything. But it was those were really good shops, good crew, good bunch of people. I was up for E5 there. I was up for E5 in Vietnam right after I'd gotten out of the hospital from my ambush. So I came back to base camp, or back to my company area, and they said, oh, tomorrow morning you're first one up for E5 board. I was like, what? And so I hadn't studied or looked into it or anything. I just went. I said, what the heck, So I couldn't think of anything. The answers they wanted for it. I was just blank. I just hadn't got a clear head yet from 10 days ago. I was in a ditch getting shot. So I didn't make that one. So then I was in Germany for I don't know, a few months, and they put me up for E5 there, and I went before the board. And I got the highest points of anybody. There was a huge list of guys that they had before the board. And just because of time and grade and, you know, all those answer and the way I answered the questions, I came out with the highest points, right at the top. I didn't get it.
You didn't get it.
Didn't get it.
Why not?
One of the officers didn't care for my, I didn't show respect, appropriate respect for a senior officer. He questioned, he was looking through my file, said, "Well, Tucker, I see that you're wearing a Purple Heart, but I don't see in your file where you got a Purple Heart." Well, I just stood up, started taking my tie off. I was going to show him. I said, "I got shot here, I'm missing a tooth here, and I'll show you this scar here." And one of the majors on the board said, "It's okay, Eddie's, sit down," you know, so I sat down. And about that time, he said, "Oh, I see it, here it is." You know, well, I don't know if he was just trying to see how I would respond, but I didn't respond appropriately, I guess. So my captain, this is like a week later, I'm working on a vehicle, we're changing out a bunch of wheel bearings, and the captain says, "Tucker, get over here." So I went over there, he has this folder, he flops it open, he shows me the scores, shows me that, you know, like, right here you are, at the very top, and you got blackballed, you gotta tell me what happened. So, that's what happened. I never did make E5. And it's probably just as well. You know, I really wasn't an Army career guy anyway. If I'd have made it, one of the guys that might want to stay in might not have, so, yeah.
What's your best memory of Germany?
It's just a genuinely pretty neat country. You know, everybody was, for the most part, other than GIs, everybody was nice. I had a German family there that I knew real well, and they treated you great. All the shops and the places to go. We loved the Autobahn because you could go as fast as you wanted. We'd be going 100 miles an hour in this old 64 Galaxy that my sergeant had. And some old guy smoking a pipe would pass us in his Mercedes. I'm like, what the heck? But it was a real neat country. I liked the terrain. You know, it had good scenery, and I liked the cities and the people. I loved the Fasching parties where everybody could get together and drink beer and dance and have a great time and not get killed. You know? So that was good. And coming from Vietnam, you know, it was kind of nice. You know, and I had plenty of guys there that we ran around with. And the food was good. Oh my gosh, the food was good. I'd go out to those small restaurant pubs in the small towns where it wasn't real touristy or anything. You golly, they'd just cover you up with food.
Yes.
And, you know, real reasonable price and wonderful food.
Did you travel around Germany?
We just traveled around and saw a few small towns and zoos and stuff. We didn't do much. Now, some of the guys in the company went and shoot. They traveled. They get on the train and go all over Europe. We went to Mannheim a few times and, you know, just kicking around small towns. We just go exploring. No real agenda or anything. My friend liked zoos, and he'd say, "Well, let's go see. There's supposed to be a zoo over here in this little town." We'd go over there. Sure enough, there's a real nice little zoo in a little bitty town. You know, so it was.
When did you get your discharge?
I think that was April of what was that? 72. Must have been close to that.
Okay.
Out of Fort Dix, New Jersey. Yeah, it's on there. Come on, phone. Play fair. So honorable, looks like April 29th, 1972.
Okay. What did you do after you got your discharge?
Came back home and kicked around for 2 or 3 weeks, and then went back to work at Peerless for about a year. And I tried to get jobs as a mechanic because, you know, like, heck, I got 15 weeks training and worked on wheel and track vehicles. I've got, you know, pretty good understanding of what I'm doing. Plus, I always worked on my own stuff too. And so it didn't work out. They all wanted degrees from some tech school or from some college or something, you know, and so I didn't have any luck even finding a job with Independent at that time. So I went back to work at Peerless, made storm windows for a while, and then went to work with my brother-in-law. He was a AKC registered pup broker. He would sell to the pet shops. All the breeders would bring them into him, and then he'd buy them and sell them to the pet shops. And we did that for, I don't know, a few months or so. And then he and I couldn't really come to terms on, you know, some of his habits. So I went to work for W.S. Dickey Clay, which is a sewer pipe manufacturer in Pittsburgh, Kansas. And I worked there for 7 years and went to school at Pittsburgh. And Dickey Clay paid for my books, and the military paid for, the government paid for my college. And so I got a degree in automotive technology and went to work for the oil industry after a couple of years after I graduated. We had 3 kids, and I went to work in South Texas with Ammon Oil USA. And they were later bought up by Phillips 66, which was the best thing that ever happened.
When did you come to Bartlesville?
In 1990. Until then, I worked in the field in natural gas plants and processing. And then it was in mechanical maintenance there most of the time, operations and maintenance. So, you know, maintenance has played a big role for me. Then in 90, I came to Bartlesville and went to work in the lubricants business. Well, the lubricants business has a whole lot to do with mechanical maintenance. As just virtually all machines use lubrication of some kind. So, and being in technical service, it encompassed everything, anything that was lubricated, whether it was engine oil, transmission fluid, natural gas engine oils, aviation oils, you name it, greases, anything that required lubrication was my job. And I had a good mentor, and he retired, and I took over his job as the technical director for lubricants in Phillips 66.
Were you at
It
the
was
research
Phillips
center?
Petroleum at the time. I was at research in Ponca City,
Ponca City.
and head of their technical service group and training at that time. I did that for 8 years over there. And then that group moved back to Bartlesville and research, and I retired.
Okay. Would you join the Army again?
You know, I probably should have stayed in. I looked at joining the Air Force after I was out a while, but I had this little disability, like 20% disability, which wasn't much. And if I went active, they were going to take my disability away from me. So I thought, you know, I don't know if I'll ever get it back. You know, once, you know, I just didn't like it. And that was just the tone. When I went and they said, well, yeah, you know, you can join. I was talking to the National Guard one time. They said, yeah, you can join, but you know, anytime you're active, then we're going to have to deduct from your disability for that. And I said, you know, that's one of the reasons I didn't care for the Army to begin with.
Yeah.
So then later years, when I was real close to the threshold age, I looked at going in as a warrant officer with in the Air Force, or the equivalent to a warrant officer, where I could be involved in maintenance. And I had a good friend in the Air Force at the time. And it was kind of a similar thing. You know, you no sooner start talking to them and they start telling you how it's going to be. You know, I'm like, I'd just rather be responsible for my own destiny and not be saddled to the military. It's made for some people, and some people it's not.
Yep.
And I just preferred to be out there fighting it in the free world.
I'd like to do a word association. I'll give you some words and you give me your reaction.
Okay.
The first one is basic training.
Yeah, pretty tough.
AIT.
Very good.
Vietnam.
Really tough.
704th maintenance.
Good outfit. Really good people for all the people that I interacted with.
Ankei.
Wasn't one of my best experiences.
Foxhole.
I was on edge the whole time I was in Ankei. That place just did not set well with me. My first bunk was over a crater where the bomb went off in the barracks. Didn't take me long to move. As soon as somebody, processed out, I went down in the middle of the barracks. Foxhole, okay in a pinch. Better than sleeping on the ground, getting a bullet in the head.
50 caliber.
Oh, intense weapon. Jeez.
July.
Good base camp. Good layout. Of course, the beach kind of made it for me.
Ambush.
I just wish and hope that nobody ever has to go through another one. I know it's not practical, but I wish it could be so.
Germany.
Beautiful country. Once you got to know people there, though, you did, like the family that I knew there, if you would get to having too much fun or just felt like stepping out on the balcony and giving out a holler or something, they'd be like, no, don't do that, don't do that. They'll be calling the police.
Yes.
Like, what? Over a little holler? So I don't know, things, from my perspective, it was a great place, but they might have, of course, some of these people were still remembering old Germany, so they might have had they've been a little apprehensive about my outgoing nature.
Ho Chi Minh.
I can't say the word that comes to mind. Not good. Certainly a manipulator of people.
Lyndon Johnson.
Good man. Just got caught in a bad time.
Richard Nixon.
I have some negative thoughts about Richard. He was probably trying his best, but he just overstepped.
How do you want to be remembered?
As somebody that tried their best, that gave it what I could is the best that I could do. What I did is the best I could do. People always think that I could have done this better, I could have done that better, but I couldn't have. That's it. What I gave is what there was.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think that pretty well wraps it up.
Where'd you meet your wife?
It's an interesting story. She wouldn't want me to tell it. I met her in Fort Scott. She's from Girard, which is just 20 miles away, something like that. And my dad had known her because she worked at Peerless, but she didn't know me yet. I didn't know her. And so we met one night, and I was telling her that she said, well, who are you? She didn't know me from anywhere. I said, well, I'm Harold Tucker. She said, no, you're not. You're not Harold Tucker. I said, heck, I'm not. My dad's Lloyd Tucker. I'm Harold Tucker. Just got out of the Army. She says, well, I know Harold Tucker, and he's a fat guy. I said, well, why do you think I was fat? He says, well, I saw pictures of you. Your dad showed me pictures. You're fat. And now the pictures just made me look fat. I was weightlifting and I was all puffed up and holding like 300 pounds for the picture, just to get a picture to send to mom and dad. And dad showed her that picture while I was all puffed up. She thought I was a big fat guy. We went round and round over that till I had to go through all kinds of, testifying to get her to believe me. Well, you must have lost some weight because those pictures are fat.
Well, sir, this is an excellent interview.
But we've been together 46 years.
46 years.
So working on 46. We got married in 73. Anyway, so,
Well, this is an excellent interview.
well, thank you.
I want to thank you for your service and thank you for the interview.
Well, certainly my pleasure.
And again, this is January 28th, 2019. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with Harold Tucker in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Thank you.
Thank you.